y'all, Dixie here. Today I want to tell you a story from the trail. More specifically, I want to talk to you about my most sketchy experience while hitchhiking. After I get done with the story, I want to talk to you about some tips for hitchhiking, including ways to get a ride more easily, and then also ways to make sure that you're staying safe while doing so. Now, the story is not meant to fearmonger. I am always learning, so I am happy to share my successes and my mistakes on this channel so other people can learn from them as I have learned from them. And I think in this particular story, I certainly did some things right, and I probably could have improved upon some things. But this way y'all can listen to it and just try to imagine how you would prepare yourself for this situation. I have literally hitchhiked over 100 times, and in those 100 plus times, I only had one instance where things got a little weird, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. So once upon a time, it was a hot sunny day at Walker Pass in the middle of the desert, and me and my new friend Dibs were out there with our thumbs out trying to hitchhike to Lake Isabella, which was 38 miles west of Walker Pass. Dibs and I had heard that this would kind of be a tough hitch. Sometimes there wasn't a lot of traffic, or because the trail was so far away from town, sometimes the people coming through didn't know what folks were doing, so they'd really be kind of hesitant to pick people up. But to our surprise, the first truck we stick our thumb out for, he actually stopped. I climbed in the back seat, Dibs hopped up front, and the man driving appeared to be in his late 40s or early 50s. Not long after we started down the road, I noticed that there was a cooler there in between Dibs and the fellow driving, and the guy slung open the top of it and threw both me and Dibs a beer, and then opened one and started chugging it himself, and I mean chugging it. But honestly, in all the hitches I've had, this really isn't that unusual. A lot of times folks are happy to share beers with hikers or Cokes or whatever beverages they might have in their vehicle. But even as we continued on with the windows rolled down, because it was about 105 degrees that day, I could smell beer pretty heavily coming from the man who was driving, which was a bit concerning, but we were heading to town, so I wasn't really going to be picky at that time, and we continued on. Within the first few minutes, this man shared a lot of personal information about himself, including that his brother had recently committed suicide, his wife was leaving him, and that he was currently going through a lot. He told us about his old rodeo days and the parties and the women and the drugs and the booze. Now, it felt a little strange that somebody would share so much personal information with two people that they just randomly picked up on the side of the road. I'm all about hearing people's stories though, and I thought maybe this guy's just lonely and he needs somebody to talk to. And mind you, he had no idea what the Pacific Crest Trail was or what we were doing, but he was happy to pick us up anyway. 38 miles, most of which was out of his way because he lived on the way to Lake Isabella, but he did mention that he should probably pull off when we got near his house because the brakes were going out on his truck, and it was downhill from Walker Pass to Lake Isabella, and he thought that it might not be the greatest idea to pull a horse trailer all that way with the brakes going out on his truck. At this point, I am definitely not thrilled about the situation, and Dibs and I are giving each other the eye like, what have we gotten ourselves into? But I figured that this man will just pull off at his house, drop off the trailer real quick, we'll just cross our fingers, ask for forgiveness, and hope that we make it to town okay. But we get there, and the man cuts off the truck, gets out, goes inside his house, and Dibs and I are left sitting there like, what do we do? So we get out of the truck and go sit on the front porch to get in the shade because you can't sit in a vehicle on a 105 degree day in the desert. As we get out of the truck though, I'm starting to become more concerned about the situation. So I take a quick picture of the tag of his truck and send it to my mother. I also take a picture of the house, I drop a pin, I do all of that, and I send it to her and I say, don't freak out yet, I'm just letting you know that we're getting a ride from a guy who insisted on going by his house. He's a little weird, so I just want to keep you in the loop as to what's going on. Just as Dibs and I sit down on the rocking chairs on the front porch, this man who, let's just call Tom, pops out of the door, gives us some more beer and says, hey, y'all just come on inside and hang out for a little while. Well, I was absolutely adamant that I was not going to go in the house. I wasn't rude about it, but I just said, no, thank you. I'm just going to chill out here on the porch. It's a really nice day here in the desert. And, you know, we're just really looking forward to getting to town and taking a shower and taking a load off. And he says, well, why go to town and spend money on a motel? You can just stay with me. Like I said, my wife just left. I have plenty of room. I've got a shower. I've got beer. You can do laundry here. And for a moment, I just thought, what do I say? Like, no, you're creepy. Thankfully, I came up with a quick lie. Most of the times I don't like to lie, but in this situation, I threw out, well, actually, we have reservations for a room in town already, so we've already spent the money. Dibs quickly nods his head in agreement and says, that's right, we do. We have reservations. We got to get to town. I feel like at that point, most normal people would say, oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Let me go ahead and get you to town like I promised I would when I picked you up. But not Tom. It seems like he doesn't even really register what we said. And then he looks at me with this real serious expression on his face. And he says, you've got some pretty hair. That blonde hair is the only reason I picked you up, you know. And after an awkward silence, Tom's face kind of cracks and he laughs and he looks at Dibs and he says, just kidding, man. You ever seen Brokeback Mountain? Wow, way to make two people very uncomfortable in less than 30 seconds, Tom. So at that point, Dibs and I are pretty nervous, and I'm thinking, is this guy just messing with us, or is he serious? And then he breaks again and laughs and says, just kidding, nobody should like sodomy, but he uses a much more graphic term and says, unless you've been to prison like I have, I would know because I spent 4 years there. So Tom starts telling us about how he was at the bar and this man was hitting on his wife and he got upset about it, and his wife got up on the bar and was dancing, and this man was trying to touch her inappropriately. So Tom went over there and took care of him by punching him in the face. And he said the man hit the floor and he thought he had just knocked him out, but he was dead. Apparently Tom's big fist, which I'm really focused on now, has hit a man in the nose and torn his nose off before and killed the man. And he said they tried to accuse him of hitting the man with a pipe or some other weapon. He swears he did not, and that the justice system is so corrupt. And he goes into the story of how he ended up only getting 4 years because of a good old boys golf game, and just a whole lot of other details that we really didn't want to know. I mean, we just wanted to get to town. In all of this, I was still messaging with my mother and letting her know that we were okay, but I also started a voice recording of the whole conversation just because at this point I'm thinking, if somebody finds our bodies, maybe it'd be good to have his voice captured. I don't know if that really makes sense or not, but I figured it might be a good idea to have some documentation of us being there, Tom's voice, the time frame, etc. We get back in the truck, which I know makes me seem crazier than Tom for climbing back into the truck, but he continues talking about his soon-to-be ex-wife and how she held out for him that whole 4 years that he was in prison just to leave him soon after. And he explains that the big fight that they got into that was finally the straw that broke the camel's back was over a horse. So Tom wanted to sell the horse to somebody who offered him like 5 times what they had purchased the horse for, but his wife really, really loved this horse and didn't want to get rid of it. So apparently Tom was really mad at her for not making the extra cash on the horse, and he decided to take the horse out for a ride the next day. And in his words, he just rode that horse and rode that horse and rode that horse that day, and the strangest thing happened. It just fell over and died. Basically, Tom admitted to riding his wife's horse to death because she wasn't willing to sell it and make extra cash off of it. So now not only has Tom admitted to killing a man by tearing off his nose with one punch, but he's also bragged on the fact that he got back at his wife by killing her horse by riding it to death. And y'all, as we finally were approaching Lake Isabella and pulling into town, Tom gets a call from his attorney that he says he just has to take. And he starts arguing with his attorney and calling a past baby mama a lot of colorful words because she's wanting more child support from Tom. And we finally pull up to the motel that Dibs and I are aiming to stay at. We get out, we tell him thank you, and he hands us this note with his name and number on it to call us if we happen to need anything. I would rather have walked back to Walker Pass than to get back in the vehicle with that man, because I could not believe that we made it there safely in the first place. As we finally see Tom's truck pulling away from the motel, Dibs looks at me and he says, "Are you glad I was with you for that hitch?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes." And he's like, "Hell, I was glad that you were there with me for that hitch." And as if all that wasn't enough, the next day while Dibs was running errands around town and he was walking down to the post office, he said he saw Tom's truck pull over in front of him onto the sidewalk off of the main road in town. And he rolls down the window and he says, "Hey, you seen that Dixie girl anywhere?" And Dibs says, "No, man, I ain't seen her since we got to town yesterday." So thankful Dibs was looking out for me. I mean, of course, after all of that craziness. But Dibs and I definitely had a celebratory drink that night, that we were both alive and well, and that we could laugh about the story and hopefully tell it for years to come as a way for people to learn some things that could potentially go wrong during a hitch, and maybe think about how to remedy some of those. Now let's get into the topic of hitchhiking in general. Most hitches that you experience are probably not going to be like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride with Tom, but instead with mostly normal people. So let's talk about how you can make yourself look less scary, because it's not only scary for you as a person climbing into somebody's vehicle that you don't know, but when somebody pulls over to give you a ride, they don't know you either. And that can also be a little intimidating from their end. So I want to cover some ways to make yourself look less scary and to make it more likely for you to get a ride. I know some of you right now are like, well, the safest way to be safe while hitchhiking is to not hitchhike at all. And I do realize that, and I do think that if you have other means for getting a ride, certainly take those. There are some areas on trails where you can arrange for shuttles, or if you're just doing a section and you do an in and back to your car, you won't have to worry about hitchhiking. But on a long distance hike, specifically a through hike, it's nearly impossible to get a shuttle for each time you need to go in and do a resupply. You may not have service at a trailhead, or you may not want to limit your time frame as far as, have the pressure to be at a certain place at a certain time for a shuttle to pick you up. And then also you might be on a budget and not be able to afford a shuttle every time you need to go into town. For whatever reason, it's almost always a necessity while on a long distance hike or a through hike to hitchhike. Most people on well-traveled trails like the AT, PCT, and CDT are going to know what you're doing, but it always helps to make yourself look a little less scary. So you can take off your hood, take off sunglasses, smile, look like a pleasant person that just simply wants a ride into town, not like somebody who is going to rob somebody. Make sure that your pack and your trekking poles are visible. I've had a lot of folks say, I'm kind of new to the picking up hitchhikers thing, but I know that backpackers are coming through, and as long as I can see a pack that looks like y'all's kind of pack, and usually hiking poles, those kind of give it away that you're a hiker and not just a random homeless person or vagabond that's traveling across the country, which those people need rides too, but I'm just saying, if you appear to be a backpacker, you're more likely to be picked up. To increase your chances of being picked up, I would try to go to an area that has plenty of space for somebody to pull off the road. If you're on a main highway, it can be really dangerous for yourself, the person driving, and others if a car is stopping right in the middle of the highway. So if you can get to an area where there's a parking lot or at least a turn area that somebody can pull off safely, that's going to increase your odds. Otherwise, folks might fly by and be like, sorry, you weren't really in an area where I could access you. And finally, it's important to hitch when you have plenty of daylight. Not only does it make the person driving feel more comfortable knowing that they have plenty of daylight to pick you up and drop you off where you're going, but it's also a way to protect yourself too. So in summary, just look friendly, less threatening, smile, and make sure you put your thumb out to people who are going in the direction that you want to go. Some guys will swear that it's easier to get a ride if they have a female with them. I know having two people can be kind of intimidating, but I have had people tell me, other than just Tom, that they picked me up because I was a female and they probably wouldn't have stopped for me alone or me and somebody else if I hadn't been a girl. Now I'll tell you what I do to protect myself. If y'all have any other tips, feel free to share that in the comments also. As I'm approaching the trailhead and I'm getting ready to hitch, I put my phone and my wallet in some kind of pockets, usually my shirt pockets, where I can close a little Velcro flap, that way they're secured. I make sure that I have these things easily accessible, because if I have to tuck and roll out of a vehicle for some reason, or run away from somebody on foot, or for whatever other reason get out quickly, I like to know that I have those items, because I feel like if I can call for help and if I have money to pay for something, I can figure everything else out. Then I also make sure to have some form of protection easily accessible. I carry a neck knife now, so it's right there ready to go. I usually tuck it in my shirt so I don't look real intimidating it might make sense to even pull it out of your shirt if you do want to look intimidating. I mean, you just kind of have to judge it as you go. It could, of course, always be used against me too, so that's something to keep in mind, but I just feel better when I have a neck knife right there tucked into my shirt where I can access it if I need it quickly. On the Appalachian Trail and part of the Pacific Crest Trail, I also carried pepper spray, and I would usually keep that in my pocket of my pants, or if I was wearing my puffy, in my puffy pocket. Again, easily accessible and ready to go. If you're hiking in bear country, especially grizzly bear country, and you have bear spray on you, if you have your pack in your lap and that in like your drink holder compartment on the side of your pack, then that's always something else you could use in self-defense. Or even a trekking pole. If you have your trekking poles collapsed and down at your feet, you can always use that if you need to. Probably one of the best ways you can protect yourself is to use the buddy system. As I mentioned before, having 2 or more people might decrease your chance of getting a ride, but it might also increase your chance of getting a ride with somebody who's not looking to harm you or to try to take on 2 people. Make sure as you're approaching the vehicle, you really kind of scope the person out. Again, it doesn't hurt to sneak a quick picture of a tag or the vehicle and text that information to somebody as you're going down the road. But as you're talking to the person and you're getting in, make sure you go with your gut. If you feel uncomfortable about the person for any reason, have an excuse ready to go where you can bail out of the situation. You can say, oh my goodness, I just realized I left my stakes back at the campsite and I have to go back and get those. Or, oh no, I left my raincoat. Or, name something that's not easily visible from the outside of your pack. Or maybe you tell them that you forgot that you told somebody that you hiked with earlier today that you would wait on them because they didn't want to hitchhike alone. Just have some kind of excuse if you need to bail out ready to go. That way you're not left kind of stumbling over your words and making it real awkward, and you can get out of the situation because you've already thought about it and have something ready. And don't be embarrassed to say no. If you really do feel uncomfortable with the situation, it's probably best to go with your gut. And this is where I could have potentially practiced what I preached in the situation I was in, but again, it was kind of hairy, and at that point, I didn't know whether I should just continue being cool with it or kind of make a stink. And I wasn't right there by the highway anymore where I could just get another ride. Aaron says that when he's getting a hitch and he gets in the vehicle, he waits to put his seatbelt on after the other person does. So if somebody's going to attack you, they probably want more range of motion, so they might not put their seatbelt on. So the same is true for him. He wants to be able to escape quickly if they decide to attack. I've never done this before, but honestly, I didn't even think about it until he mentioned it to me. It could just have you going down the road with somebody who never wears their seatbelt, so you don't have yours on and then you get in a wreck, and that could be problematic. But again, these are all things that you have to weigh and figure out what makes you feel the most comfortable and safe. And if you think it's a good idea to record the situation in case things get weird, then that's always an option too. Chances are the person you get in the vehicle with is not looking to harm you, and they really just want to do you a favor and get you to town safely, and they like supporting the backpacking community, or they're interested in what you're doing. So while you can prepare for the idea that the person who is picking you up could be a serial killer, you should probably treat them like they're a kind person who's trying to do you a favor. And with that, I just want to cover a little bit of etiquette. Sometimes when stinky, dirty, exhausted hikers are getting into normal, clean people's vehicles, they forget their manners. So I usually ask the person, where would you like me to put my pack? And again, at this point, I have my most valuable possessions, including my phone and my money and some form of protection on my person. So even if I have to put the pack somewhere else and they end up trying to steal my gear, at least I get away with my life and my valuables. The reason I ask this question is a lot of times my pack is kind of muddy and gross and stinks. So I'd like to put it where the person doesn't mind something really gross sitting in their car. A lot of times this is in the trunk or the back hatch, and most times these folks have given rides to other hikers, so they'll probably go ahead and direct you to that area to put your pack. And if you don't feel comfortable putting your pack wherever they want you to, you can always decline the ride or tell them that you just feel more comfortable holding your pack on your lap. Once I'm in the vehicle, I always suggest to the person, hey, it's okay if you want to roll the windows down. I know that I smell really bad. Sometimes they decline and they're like, no, I know y'all are hot or cold and you want AC or heat, and then that's fine. but I always kind of give them that out in case they don't generally ride with the windows down. That way they don't think that they're offending me by telling me I stink and rolling the windows down, because I know that I stink. And finally, be thankful. Tell them how much you appreciate their time and their efforts in getting you to town, because a good hitching experience for them will increase the likelihood of a hitching experience for another hiker who's coming behind you. You can offer a few dollars for gas money if you'd like. Most of the folks that I ride with decline, and if they are looking for tips, usually they make that known by having a tip jar up on the dash, or they might tell you a story how they're really hurting for money. Either way, it's always nice to offer a little bit of gas money. A lot of times you'll find that gets turned down, but it doesn't hurt. And just a final word on hitchhiking, you want to make sure that wherever you are thumbing a ride, that it's actually legal to do so, because there are some states in the US where hitchhiking is illegal. All right, y'all, well, that is all I have for you today on my sketchiest hitchhiking story and some tips to help you get a ride and also to keep yourself safe while hitchhiking. If y'all have any additional questions about hitchhiking in general or my experience with it, please feel free to ask those in the comments. Also, if y'all are interested in more stories from the trail, let me know that too, because I've kind of thought about sharing some of my stories, but I don't know if that's more likely a podcast thing than a YouTube thing. So anyway, y'all just let me know in the comments if you liked the story, and if I get enough interest, then I might share more in the future. Thank you again for watching. Don't forget to subscribe before you go, and we will see y'all next time.